Hey, what's going on guys? Taylor here, and as many of you know, I'm a big fan of those JRPGs, especially games on the PlayStation 1. Now, I haven't reviewed a lot of PS1 RPGs, but today I wanted to talk about one of my all-time favorite PS1 JRPGs, The Legend of Dragoon from Sony. Now, at the time, this was kind of built up as like a big competitor to Final Fantasy. A lot of the franchises that we know today, like Dragon Quest and a couple others, weren't really that big in the West. So this was a game that was getting put on those little demo discs that would be packaged in with magazines or just sent in the mail. And I remember playing this game for the very first time and just being blown away by the graphics and the different things you can do with the combat system. Now, by today's standards, the game isn't really anything all that special. It's maybe even a little archaic, but you know, let's take a trip down nostalgia lane, and I want to talk about one of my favorite PS1 JRPGs of all time, so let's take a look.
7 incarnations of dragons served the Emperor. Their bravery inspired people to take up arms. Thus began the Dragon Campaign.
Alright, so in Legend of Dragoon, you play as this guy named Dart, and now he's been on this adventure looking for someone he calls the Black Monster, this creature that murdered his family and destroyed his village, so he's out on this quest for vengeance when one day a big dragon kind of lures him back into his village, and he's reunited with some old friends and people he used to live with, and then he comes to find out his childhood friend Shanna is captured, and this sort of kicks off the adventure. He goes to rescue her, he meets a few warriors, friends along the way, and eventually he gets caught up in this big epic story involving dragons, dragoons, and he gains this ability to transform and become super powerful and meets other people along the way who share the same abilities. Now, I will have to say that at the time, I didn't really know any better. I was, 10, 11, 12 when this game came out. I thought the translation's fine, but going back now to play this game, the translation was not the best. The dialogue was kind of weird, a little quirky, maybe a little corny at times, and even some of the words they used to translate, some of the names of things was very generic. I mean, there were just characters named Albert, Lloyd, and some of the creatures were just literally firebirds, something super, super basic. And while things looked cool, it would have been nice for them to give it a little bit more personality with some creative names instead of just being as generic as possible. That all said though, each character is pretty unique and has their own personality that comes through not only in how they fight and in little bits of dialogue, but even in their animations, as simple as they may have been at the time. I think my favorite character in the game has to be Haschel. He's sort of this wise old mentor to Dart, somebody he used to train with, but then he's also sort of a perv in a little bit of a way, but he tries to play it off every once in a while, and I don't know, there's a lot of funny moments with him and making fun of Dart and talking to some of the girls that eventually join your party throughout the game. Now, the combat system is typical JRPG flair at the time, but they put their own unique spin on it by adding in sort of a QTE or quick time event component to it. Essentially, it is turn-based, so each character will go in turn, each enemy will go in turn, but when you attack, depending on what move you have equipped, you'll be prompted to hit certain buttons in a series, and the more you do, the more your combo will build up. And before you get your Dragoon ability, it doesn't really mean anything, it's just a matter of doing more damage. However, when you do get your Dragoon, the longer your combos go, the more SP you build up, the more energy you build up, and you can use that to transform into your Dragoon. Basically, you have to build up these points, and once you build up enough points, you'll be able to transform into your Dragoon. So the higher your combos are, the better it is overall, basically. And that's the other component to the combat, is not only are you doing typical turn-based combo attacks, but once each character gets their ability to turn into a Dragoon, basically a human wearing this dragon armor, and each one is a specific theme like fire or forest or darkness. And they all have special abilities, whether it be shooting fireballs, draining energy, or simply doing a massive attack for extra damage. And it was always really cool to do that. I always found it really fun to watch the transformations and watch the special attack moves, although I will say the voice acting is a little bit corny once they're naming off these special attacks.
Heartblade.
First dance! Final burst!
Rose Storm!
The only unfortunate thing I felt with the combat is that I didn't think it was balanced very well, because when you get to the end of the game, there's really only two other characters that you're going to want to use, and that's Albert and Haschel, because the other characters get their Dragoon ability so late in the game that it doesn't auto-balance very well. So once you try to play with characters like Kongal or Maru, they're just so far behind that once you get to the end of the game, even if you're like grinding like crazy, they're just not going to be as strong, and it's really not going to be worth it to use them. I've replayed this game at least 3 or 4 times, and those are the same characters I've played with every time. And no matter how many times I think, oh, I'll play a different character, I'll mix it up and try to play with somebody different, it just ends up being too hard, and it just seems pointless to try to use anybody else. One thing the Legend of Dragoon has going for it that can compete with just about any JRPG on the system were its graphics. Now, one staple of PS1 games were they had pre-rendered backgrounds to, save on loading times, and with certain, real-time renders that would really pop out and really stand out, that you could tell were like supposed to be in the foreground, something you can interact with, whether it be doors on buildings or rivers flowing through forest or birds or what have you. And I feel like Legend of Dragoon blends that in a just really beautiful way that most other PS1 games, just in general, weren't able to do. Some of my favorite places in Legend of Dragoon are some of these beginning forests where you can see a rushing waterfall and a peaceful river. And my absolute favorite town in the whole game is a town called Flets. It basically reminds me of Greece in a way. It's kind of got this white cobblestone architecture, and it seems like a very lively, very tropical place. There's a river flowing through it, and there's a scene later in the game when it turns to nighttime and all the lights go on. It just looks absolutely stunning. One of my favorite moments in the whole game. And there's a ton of variety in environments. You'll get on a ship and you'll be able to sail in the ocean. There's some futuristic cities later on in the game, for lack of a better term, and there are just a great variety of towns. No two really look the same. At the beginning, it might seem like it's a generic fantasy RPG with a castle town, but as you go further along, it just gets pretty nuts and gets really creative, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with just how creative some of these environments get. I'd be remiss to not mention the absolute amazing soundtrack. Now, I will say that they reuse songs quite a bit. There's a number of towns and locations that reuse the same song, but for as limited as the palette of songs is, I really enjoyed them. In fact, I ended up buying the soundtrack, and every once in a while I turn it on and it helps me sleep, or if I need to study, or if I just want to do something quiet. It's a great soundtrack to do that too. One last thing I'll say about Legend of Dragoon is this is a meaty game. It's going to take you 20, 30, 40 hours, depending on if you want to do side quests. There's a lot of there's these things called Stardust, and once you collect all of them, you're able to do a secret battle, which I've never actually gotten around to doing myself, but it was always fun to kind of walk around each town and try to find all these Stardust and see how creatively they're hidden, because when you find one, it's like, oh, I'm gonna look in this fire, or let's see what's in this pile of junk. There's always these really unique, kind of funny little ways that the game will explain that you're picking them up. So it's worth checking that out. There's a bunch of funny little side quests. Like there's this one where you have to get a beer for a drunk guy so he'll move out of the way, and you can get some items. And there's a commercial town called Lohan where you can earn tickets, and the more tickets you buy, you can redeem later for better items. So there's a lot of side distractions, considering how old the game was, that can keep you busy well past just the simple story. Now, as I mentioned before, this game doesn't necessarily hold up really graphically or gameplay wise compared to games of today like Ni no Kuni and the Tales games. However, as somebody that grew up with this game and just grew up in this era, what I consider the golden era of JRPGs, this is one of the standout classics for me personally. And it was just so much fun to go back and play this game and rediscover all these areas and fight those fights that I can remember, some of them hard, some of them a little bit easier, and now I know the strategy, so it's not quite as mind grain inducing, but nonetheless still very fun. And if you have pretty much any PlayStation platform can play this, except PS4. I believe they still can't emulate PS1 games, but PS1, PS2, PS3, whether through the disc or on PS3, you can buy the PS Classic version, and I believe Vita can play Legend of Dragoon as well. I could be wrong on that. but Legend, you can play it on the PSP or on the Vita. So pretty much any PlayStation platform, you're good to go as far as Legend of Dragoon is concerned. And one little side note I wanted to mention is that I always felt like this would be a really great game that deserves a sequel. And in fact, I remember I used to read a PSM, PlayStation Magazine, back in the day, and they had a top 10 list that they said top 10 sequels we want, and this was right, you know, in the thick of the PS2 days. And one thing they mentioned was Legend of Dragoon, and of course we never got it. However, IGN did run a little article. They managed to get some information out of Shuhei Yoshida, who now runs all the studios worldwide for Sony, and he mentioned that they were working on a sequel at the time, not too long after it was finished, and he said for whatever reason, he can't remember why, but they ended up not finishing the game, wanted to move on to other things, which is really sad because I would love a sequel to this game, no matter how cornball or cheesy it might be. It'd be really fun. And there was also rumors that Dart was supposed to be a playable character in PlayStation All-Stars, but unfortunately that game didn't sell very well, so that piece of DLC never ended up coming out. But I would love to know what you guys thought of this game, or if you even played it, if you intend to play it after watching this review maybe. I'd love to hear what you have to say, if it's as nostalgic for you as it is for me, because it holds a lot of memories and it's a really special game that I ended up playing quite a few times and spent a lot of time with. So anyways guys, thank you so much for watching this review. If you like these kind of retro reviews, let me know. I like doing them. I love going back and look at these old games that maybe some people haven't played and I grew up playing. They're special to me, so they might be special to some of you out there as well. So definitely leave a comment, let me know if you guys want to see more of these, and leaving a like always helps too, just so I know if it's if you like this kind of stuff or not. So anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you next time.